How's it going, guys? AnxiousCynic here with my first ever game review. If you're familiar with the channel, then you probably know I do typically Let's Plays, but I decided to try something new. I'm kind of in an experimental phase right now, so I decided, what if I did a game review where I could kind of sit down and enjoy a game for a little bit, and then give you guys my thoughts and recommendations. Sound good? Maybe? So today we're going to be looking at a game called Figment. It's by Bedtime Digital Games. I actually Let's Played one of their games before called Chronology, and I was quite fond of the game. I thought it was pretty good, and they contacted me and asked me to check out the game for my channel, and I was like, yes, I will do that. And they actually gave me 3 codes for Steam for any of my viewers who would be interested in playing it as well. So if you're on Steam and you want to try this game out for yourself and you want to get a free code, make sure you pay attention throughout this video, because at random points there will be a word that comes up on screen. It'll be 3 different times, and if you comment, the first 3 people to comment with all 3 words in their comment will get the code to get Figment for free. So to get started with this review, I want to go ahead and say that I was very unfamiliar with the game when I started it. I basically have seen some screenshots and maybe some clips of gameplay. I wasn't really looking into it that much. So you could say I kind of went into the game blind, like I didn't know what to expect. And I was pleasantly surprised, if that one gives you any indication of where this review is going. So to start out, the opening of the game is a lot darker than I expected. If you look at the artwork of the game, it seems very colorful and playful and whatnot. But when you start out and you get a feel for the story, things get kind of dark pretty quickly, and it's really interesting the turn that the story takes.
Hey Dad, do you ever parachute on your job?
Huh? No, not really.
Yeah, you would be too scared to parachute off a building, Dad.
Leave your dad alone, honey. You don't need to parachute when you sell houses.
Boring. When I grow old, I want a job where you have to parachute.
What? Oh, crap.
So basically when you start the game, you have this character who seems somewhat kind of lazy and apathetic. His name is Dusty, and his little bird friend comes up and she's like telling him they got some stuff to do, you know, they need help or whatever, and he doesn't want to get started until he has his cider. So your first objective in the game is to find ice for his cider so that he can get his drink on. So that's basically the introduction phase of the game, and then you get to meet the antagonist, which is a nightmare, as they're called. And there's 3 nightmares in the game, and the first one that you meet is called Fear of Loss. And during the beginning phases, he throws down these weird little like traps that slow you down, almost like quicksand or something, and you have to learn to dodge and roll and things like that.
You lost it, friend.
What? Leave my scrapbook alone.
It's mine now.
I will say in the beginning I was using mouse and keyboard, and I found the controls a little bit weird, like the keys that you have to use and whatnot were kind of oddly laid out. But I quickly realized, just like I did with Chronology, that I think the game is really meant to be played with a gamepad. So I went and got my gamepad, I hooked it up, and the controls are just infinitely better. Like, it just plays so much better. You get a lot more out of the game if you use a gamepad, at least in my experience. So if you give this a try, I recommend having a gamepad on hand. You can definitely play it with the keyboard, but I think it really lends itself to a gamepad a lot more, so that's my recommendation to you. But anyway, back to the story of the game. It's a really interesting story. I was quite surprised with how dark it is, and at the same time the gameplay is kind of light and airy, and the colors are all there. It's very colorful and whatnot, so it was really interesting to see how those things juxtapose, basically. So as you progress through the story, you know, things start to kind of come together, you get an idea for what's going on, and basically, you know, my quick synopsis would be, it's a childhood trauma. There was a car accident, you don't really know what has happened or what's gone wrong or how long it's been since the accident occurred, but the whole game basically takes place in the mind of the child. And that sounds really dark, and it's really interesting that they were able to tell a story in this way. Basically, you know, you're in their mind, and your character is an element of it. I don't want to really give too much away, because I really think it's something that should be experienced, but you're like an element of their mind, and you're trying to conquer the negative aspects of things going on. And then you have the other nightmares that represent other aspects. You have one that's like a plague, and then another one that's represented as a spider, and they basically all represent a different element of trauma or negative aspects of the psyche that are trying to take over the main story character's mind. So throughout the game, when you kill enemies and whatnot and complete certain tasks, you'll get things that drop little orbs that are called endorphins, and when you pick those up, you eventually realize, like later on in the game, when you collect enough, that it goes into raising your maximum health. Another thing they have in the game is forgotten memories, and these are things that you can find. They're basically like collectibles. I found a couple of them throughout my playthrough, but I wasn't really spending a whole lot of time trying to make sure I looked for everything and got everything, because I really just wanted to play it and get the story for now. But it adds a lot of replayability to the game, I think. If you don't get them all in the first playthrough, it gives you a reason to go back. I think really experiencing it again and like the story and whatnot is enough to make you want to go back and play it, but again, it gives you a little extra motivation to head back in there and experience this game once again.
You will lose face and all your keys, all purpose time shows no remorse. Soon all that you have left is grief over things that once was yours, and you will lose everything. You will lose everything.
One of the really interesting things about this game is the way that music is used. They actually take the music and it becomes kind of part of the story. It's a little bit more than just like, hey, this is background music, this is a soundtrack. It plays in like the villains, the main characters, the villains of the story actually sing at certain parts, like when you have boss battles and whatnot. And there's some puzzles that kind of revolve around music, and you play music in the game, like solving the puzzles in order to get to the next area and things like that. So it was really interesting, really clever way that they used music, and it was really enjoyable. It kind of makes you feel like you're part of the game in a sense. Like it kind of, somehow, it works as a way to make it more immersive. So the game is full of a lot of interesting little quirks and whatnot. Like one of the things at a certain point are like teeth that fall down and you have to dodge them and things. And I actually found like the art style kind of reminded me of an old cartoon that I used to watch as a kid called The Busy World of Richard Scarry. So it was kind of nostalgic in a way because of that. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it just kind of reminded me of it kind of loosely. So as far as the technical aspects of the game goes, the gameplay is very smooth, very much like Chronology when I played that. Like the way you move the character around is pretty smooth. There was a couple of areas where he would kind of get stuck on things or whatever if you didn't move it just right to line up with a path or whatever, but it's really not all that frustrating, and I think the gameplay is smooth enough. It's definitely one of the more smooth experiences I've seen in a game, especially with the way the art style is that can kind of make depth perception somewhat challenging. But the gameplay is so smooth and the controls are really responsive where you don't really have that much trouble navigating the environment. So I definitely give props to the gameplay aspect. It's very smooth and not frustrating.
Look at that thing!
It's one of the mind's heavy thoughts. Big and clunky.
So it is a puzzle game, but I would say the puzzles are pretty simple overall. There were a few that had me scratching my head, and I kind of had to go around and try to figure out what was going on and what I needed to do exactly, but I didn't find a whole lot of moments where I was absolutely stumped for a while. It didn't take me too long to fight through the game and figure out the puzzles and whatnot. From my experience, it's around 6 hours, maybe 5.5 to 6 hour game, depending on how you play it. If you're looking for all the forgotten memories. The Remembrains, I think as they're called. It's not the shortest game I've ever played, but it is a relatively short game. But if you're not so good at puzzles, it could take you even longer and add even more longevity to the game. And as I said about the music and whatnot, the sound design in the game I think is pretty exceptional. Not just the quality, obviously. There's a lot of, quality, technical quality to the graphics and the gameplay and the sound and all these things, but it's just the way the music was done. It was the way that all the dialogue and the music, pretty much all the elements of the game are very well and carefully crafted and kind of meld together into one solid experience, especially once you get into it and kind of see what the game is doing and what it's going for and you get a feel for it. I think the sound in the game is really something that's worth appreciating.
Yo, the beat might be playing, but hear what I'm saying. Dig it, I need a melody to make this a hit. Yep.
And as far as the visuals go, it's pretty much the same thing to me. The graphics are good for what it is. Obviously, it's a stylized art. It's not going to compare to the most technically advanced first-person shooter that's coming out or anything like that, but the game is just pretty much overall what I would say is just the perfect blend of all the elements they included. It comes together in such a solid package that you don't really need a whole lot of anything special going on or whatever. It's just the game just kind of is what it is, and it does what it does so well that I would just say that the overall design and every aspect of the game is just solid. And I don't really find, if you like these kinds of games, I don't think you'll find much to complain about or critique in Figment. A funny little note about that, I actually almost decided not to finish the game before I made the review because I actually wanted to just kind of relax and play it and experience it without having to think about what I wanted to talk about and making notes about what's going on in the game and things like that. I was just like, maybe I can just do like an impressions. And I almost stopped reviewing it just so I could actually play the game and just sit down and enjoy it. So I definitely think it's something, if you're into these kinds of games, you'll enjoy, and I recommend it.
Oh, death, wrap me in thy warm light, and let my spirit wander the plains of eternity. All those moments will be stuck in time, like a fly in a web. Oh, life, beauty of impermanence, I bid you au revoir.
Whatever.
So to conclude my final thoughts on the game, Figment is a really imaginative, fun, and comical story, but they introduce and implement sadness and drama into it so seamlessly. It's really interesting to experience a game where you have all these different emotions. I mean, the game is based on the human psyche, basically, so you're dealing with all these like heavy subjects, but also kind of the lighter side of it, and it balances it so well and tells the story so well that it's really interesting to see how they could bring that all together. It really doesn't seem like an easy task to take such dark subject matter and talking about depression and trauma and things like that, and including it in a game like this that sort of comes at you from a direction you didn't expect it to. Bedtime Digital Games did a great job of bringing all those elements together and making a game that's really just fun to play and fun to experience. You really feel like you're part of the experience, which is really interesting due to the style of the game. I did not expect that, but I give major props to it. I highly recommend the game if you're interested in these kinds of games. If you can run it on your computer, and make sure, you know, if you want a free code, that you do what I said in the beginning there and check it out. But I highly recommend it for you guys. Even if you don't get it for free, it's definitely worth buying, especially if you can catch it on sale or something like that. But that's it. That's my review of Figment. Those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like this new style of video and whatnot. If you guys want to see more, feel free to let me know. Give me suggestions for games to review, possibly. And that's it. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.
Let's party!